Hey everybody, hi Courtney.
Hello, Heidi.
Welcome to Sunday Sessions with Courtenay Pollock. We are excited to see you guys here. We've got a new backdrop behind us, and we've made sure that our bathroom breaks have been done, and we're here to get rolling with some more stories. Ready
Wonderful.
to take it away, Courtney?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Hello. So just to recap, I kind of abruptly cut the last episode off, and I was on the lam. I was coming up to Oregon, and they had confiscated my beautiful Mercedes, just took it, just took it, and left me with the old Saab. So
The sob story.
the Saab story, and but it was still drivable. I kept it up. Even though I had bought the house in Bodega Bay, which the bird's house from the Alfred Hitchcock movie, as I had said, I'm just recapping this. I had worked 3.5 years, 14 hours a day, without missing a day, saved all that money, and bought that house. So it had a lot of, of my life energy in it, and a tremendous amount of discipline work. So it wasn't an easy thing to drive away from, but I wasn't going to just offer myself up to do prison time and then be deported after it and lose everything anyway. So I just split. And I came up to Eugene. I got a little house, and I put up a couple of lights just to get going. I had no money to speak of. I think I scraped together maybe $5,000 to get started with. So I was able to get through the first 3 months and got a few pounds in, and then within 6 months I parlayed that into a bigger house and had a 6-light room going on in the garage. and now I've saved about 30,000. Then I met up with Jewel, who I'd mentioned very early in the series. I first met her when she was 15, and I think at Mickey Hart's ranch. Her and her sisters were kind of living at the ranch. And she had married one of the equipment guys, Johnny Hagan, and then all these many years later, I ran into her at Nikki Scully's 50th birthday party, and then she came home with me, and that was and then we just paired up, so shortly after that I bought this 80-acre farm outside Eugene, about 20 miles from town. It was on the Long River, which was a small river. I remember looking at the property. This is in summer, and it's beautiful. It's a half a mile long. It's an eighth of a mile wide, and that's the 80 acres. And the river meanders through the property. So there's and there was a trail on either side of the river that we actually added to. We had the farm came with a big tractor and equipment and stuff, and a big old truck and a horse trailer, and even a horse came with a horse, a lovely white horse called Dawn, who was beautifully trained. She was just, you could put a total novice child on it and they'd be safe. And anyway, so we developed more trails, and we end up with about 2 miles of trails on this little piece of, plus there's trails leading off all over the place, so we could go on long rides. I was still running, so I'd go, do early morning runs. And but when I first looked at the property, it was advertised and said it's built on a floodplain. And so I'm looking around, I go, well, I don't know. I look down the ravine where the river flows through, and there's this tiny trickle about 25, 30 feet down. Looks like nothing. And so, you know, it was a lovely summer. I did some re-fencing. The house had been renovated, so it was in good shape. It had a barn with an indoor arena, or a covered arena, and I developed an outdoor arena as well. And it also had 2 or so outbuildings. One had an upper story that I could do a little thing in, and then there was this shed which I kind of fixed up and fixed the roof so that I could do a show in there. And it was pretty invisible, you know, it's kind of the way that it was molded into the landscape. And we started growing, you know, big vegetable gardens and herb gardens. And our idea was to grow echinacea and ginkgo biloba trees. Well, it's kind of fanciful. They're both, you know, very, you know, healing, but they take years to really develop. But we thought we'd be there for a while. Anyway, it was a lovely summer. We were, you know, I was making money, and winter comes and the rains come, and I wake up one morning and it sounds like water flow. I look out the window and there's sheds and outhouses and stuff floating by the window. The house, the barn, the sheds, the outbuildings were the only things above water. They were positioned at the high points of the ground, and everything else was underwater, including the horse pastures where the horses were locked into the pasture. A big pasture, but it was fenced in. They couldn't have made it out. They couldn't have got out of the pasture. So Jewel and I went out to see if we could let them out. Well, between the upper pasture and the lower pasture is this gorge that goes through. It's kind of overgrown with brambles, blackberry, you know, and but now it's such a volume of water just surging through there. It's got such a current, and we were trying to stop the dogs from, you know, getting in it and getting swept away. And you get caught in the brambles, you're a goner. You know, you're just gonna be hung up in the brambles and drowned. And she has appointments in town. She said, well, there's nothing we can do right now. And I said, the horses, you know, she said, well, as long as it's not up to the withers, you know, they'll probably survive it. But if it gets, you know, past, you know, up to their chest, up to the tummy, then, you know, they'll get hypothermia and go down. And anyway, she takes off for her appointments. I go put my wetsuit on, and because it's freezing, you know, the water's ice cold, and it's winter, it's cold, and put my wetsuit on, and I'm gonna forge the creek. And so I leave the dogs in the house so they don't try and follow me. And I lasso a post where the gorge goes through. There's no fencing on the house side of that upper pasture because the creek bed is the boundary, but on the other side of the creek bed is the fencing for the lower pasture. So I managed to get a rope across to and then pull myself over against the current, and climb over the fence, and I'm able to wade through. I'm up to about, you know, halfway up my body, and I can see the horses. They're clustered down by the lower gate, which lets out onto the river itself, but it's actually a little higher ground, and it's below their knees. But where I was wading through, it would have been up to the withers. Anyway, I get to them, and of course they're happy to see me. I think we had 6 horses at that time. And I open the gate, and, you know, wading out, and they follow me, of course, and I'm walking up towards the barn, on the outside of the fence, which is, there's the river, and there's the fencing, and then there's this trail. It's part of our trail system, which is a little higher ground than anywhere else. But we get inside of the barn, it's really literally about no more than 50 meters away, and but it's deep the deepest right there, and I could pull myself along the fence line and traverse it, but the horses couldn't, or they wouldn't try and swim against the current. They wouldn't move. They got as far as they were going to go, and I realized that I should just take them back down the way we'd come, where there's a high point of ground which is actually above water, right alongside the river itself, but it was just the highest point of ground. So I walked them back down there, left them, and then backtracked across the lower pasture, and then I come to the creek, which is still fast flowing, and of course there's no fence on the other side. Like, it's not like I can use my rope and get a, so I'm going to have to swim this, and I got to do it now because I'm freezing. I'm losing feeling in my hands. I'm shivering because I've been out 40 minutes in this now. It's freezing water, and I strike out swimming as hard as I can, which isn't easy to do in a wetsuit anyway, and against the current, angled away from where all the blackberries are, and I'm trying to make it, it's only the width of room, but it's like such a head of water, and I can't seem to make any progress, and I'm watching this tree, and it's kind of I'm getting swept away, and just when I'm so exhausted I can't exert another, I'm going to get swept into the brambles, and right then my foot hit the ground. I was able to drag myself out and got to the house. I had to kick the door open. I had no feeling in my hands. I got into the shower. I had to kick the hot water on and try and adjust it with my feet, and I went in with my wetsuit and booties and everything to thaw out, and I'm just under the shower when Jewel returns, and I'd left a note, gone to save the horses. And I hear her go, oh my God, and I said, I'm in here, it's okay. And she said, how'd the horses? And I said, they're okay. I get out, and I'm blue, I'm shivering, and I said, I got to go back in the warm water and thaw out. Anyway, she made a hot cup of tea or something, and some breakfast, and everything was good, and the horses were safe, and so that was my first winter there. I realized it was a floodplain, that I had been told it was, and I just went, shit, all right. Just didn't get it, it's like this little trickle way down. How could it be? Where does all this water come from? Well, that's what floodplains are. They come from high ground and flow down to the valley. So we went, I think we did a few years there, maybe even 3, but we weren't going to stay. Our crops were just going to get swept away. It wasn't ideal by a long shot, so I did whatever needed doing, put it on the market, but we didn't want to live there while it was being shown. So we found this place up in Central Oregon in an area called Tumalo, and it's right between Bend and the little town of Sisters. And it was a 350 acre ranch, and it had a beautiful big house, a guest cottage, which was like a 3-bedroom cottage, which would be really good for people to work the farm, and or in my case to grow. And and a big horse barn, and by now we have 17 horses. 17. I mean, how many horses can you ride? Only one at a time, actually. And they need working, they need exercising, and of course our primary horses that we were doing, we were developing the Paso de Cuatro, a horse troupe, a dance troupe, corrugated music with costumes and stuff, and open horse shows. And so now that was a beautiful place, and there was, at the border of the property, there was nothing after that. You could go all the way to the Sisters Mountains, 100 miles of just wilderness. And so I could go running. I could go off on 3-4 hour runs and discover new country. And of course, we could go on long trail rides with the horses. And by then, we're actually doing carriage racing, and so we've got carriages and also endurance runs. We'd go on long trail rides, against the clock basically, and so endurance. I had an Azteca, which is a cross between a quarter horse and Andalusian, and they were hybridized down in Mexico, and they're a great horse. It's big, strong, level-headed. It was a beautiful horse, and but it had a tendency to stumble now and then, which is freaks you out. But he never went down, and but it was just you'd always be afraid he's going to tumble one day, and then that could be the end. You got a 1,250-pound horse, galloping along at 30 miles an hour and take a tumble in the rocks. Not good. Anyway, that was an interesting time while we're waiting for the farm to sell, and so I think we released it for 6 months, which was the summer. It's lovely weather. It was a great time, especially from the point of view of doing the long carriage riding and the endurance riding. And we did a lot of shows, and we won a lot of trophies. We were doing very well, and I'd enter into horse etiquette competitions, and I was a novice rider. I'd ridden Western, but when we got the farm outside Eugene, I got an English saddle. So did Jewel, and Jewel had grown up with horses. She was very, very savvy when it came to horses, and but I wasn't. I was relatively new to it, but I knew my way around Western riding, but I wanted to ride English because that's that. I'm English. But it was, that high school riding, if you like, it is dressage. And we both learned together. Now, I didn't have any bad habits to bring along because I didn't grow up just riding fast and loose like she did as a girl. They just grab a horse and get on bareback and ride, and, along the way they start riding Western and stuff. But they weren't schooled for any kind of correct horse, any etiquette. Anyway, but really good horsemanship, nonetheless. So I kind of advanced with the English saddle a little faster than Jewel did, which was surprising to me, and I think she was a little chagrined about it. But it was all in really good fun, and we advanced together. And then we eventually got the Andalusian horses, and I got a great deal. There was this lady who did one horse, one person shows. She had the costumery and the smoke and mirrors, like the music, and she'd go out with this horse and do all of these great dressage moves, high school moves as they're called, and they're all developed from wartime. All dressage moves, particularly the airs above the ground. Well, I don't know if many people really know what that means, but in the days of swords and horsemanship and going out to battle with mace and pike and sword and hammers and an armored horse, the horse was a tank in battle. A horse was, better than 20 men. It could go into the field of, mayhem, terrible. The din and the stink of battle, who would be a professional soldier? But, that's one of the few places you could actually get a stipend and make a living, And it was a way of life for centuries, of course, well, millennia. And So the ears above the ground, the horse, and they in Europe they'd use Andalusians because they're the most level-headed. The French would use the Percherons. Percherons are typically black, and the Andalusians are typically white. They get whiter as they get older. So a fully mature Andalusian is often all white, you know, by the time it's into its teens. And the horse I bought was 18 and knew all of this stuff. All I had to learn was the prompts to put him into all these different gaits and movements. And so this lady that I bought him from, that was her primary horse to do all her shows on. She was bringing another stallion along to use, you know, a younger horse. And my horse was getting a little tight on one side, but it was still knew everything. It was just fantastic. Her name was Shauna Goodpasture. What a great name for a horse lady, hey? And she was young and attractive, you know, and she'd go out, she'd do an amazing show with this wonderful horse I called Magic. And so I just had to learn the prompts, you know, and she just gave me, you know, literally ran it down in 10 minutes, and then I had to kind of recall what she'd said, and they're all basically minor body shifts, really, to affect all this. Typically, when you have a really well trained horse that knows all this stuff, you're on the horse's back, and you're the mind, and the horse is the machine, you know, the body. Your body, you think, and so the horse does, and you shouldn't be able to even perceive any shifts, any movement in the rider. The rider, there's subtle little, first of all, there's only ounces of weight in the reins, and you can do one hand or two hands, and they're usually held together close, pretty close to you. They're not out here, or you're not cowboying around. They're like, and they're subtle little finger pressures for, you know, and they're tiny little shifts in the pelvis and your body attitudes, and so, you know, it's ideally it's indiscernible how you're controlling the horse, and you do all this stuff. And it was a wonderful experience to be on such a great horse, so highly trained, and learn how to have him do all of this stuff. And so the airs above the ground is when horse would go into depths, into the midst of battle, and it would leap in the air and throw its hooves forward and backwards, you know, simultaneously. So it'd kick out back and front, land, and of course it would devastate, you know, half a dozen guys, front and back. And it would land, do a quarter turn, do it again, kick out back and front, quarter turn, do it again. So in a 360 turn, he would devastate, you know, 20 men.
Wow.
You know, just lay them out.
Incredible.
And meanwhile, you know, the rider, he's armored on one side, and the horse is armored on that one side, and his sword arm is free. So typically the horse turns on your not unarmored side where all the action is happening. He's armored on the other side. So it'll in this horse case, it would always move toward the right. And now I wasn't going into battle with armor and the swords and stuff like that, but that's all of those high school moves, all the dressage is coming out of what was learned in horsemanship in battle. So just for those that didn't know that, this is an interesting thing. It's not something you really think of. Anyway, I had this wonderful horse Magic, and we did shows. We developed a horse troupe with all white Andalusians. Jewel, I bought her an Andalusian foal that she raised and trained herself, which isn't an easy thing to do. You know, of course, they're really headstrong and wild when they're young, like all kids, you know. She did a very good job with this Galan is what she called the horse, and kind of like gallant, you know, Galan, nice. And so she rode a Galan, and we had two other ladies that had white Andalusians, one of whom we actually ended up buying, and it was beautiful. Of course, Jewel called it Pegasus, We didn't have a unicorn, but we did dress up as, she did dress one of the horses up as a unicorn for one of the shows. So we had a winged Pegasus and we had a unicorn.
Nice.
And but we'd go out and do shows. Open. I remember we opened the Golden State Classics out Sacramento way in California for. Of course, California's called the Golden State, so the Golden State Classic is just, it's a big horse show, and we won all kinds of awards and things. But we opened the show with our horse troupe, which is Paso de Cuatro, which is passing in pairs, really means literally. And if you've ever seen the Lipizzaners that have come to your town and done a show, there's usually 60, maybe 20, at least a dozen of them, and they are doing all of these moves in unison and passing each other, and it's a wonderful display of horsemanship and action. So we did this, but with just 4 horses, but it's still, it's quite a spectacle, with these horses all doing these moves in a choreographed to music, and so that was a great lifetime experience with the horses. It's a lovely lifestyle, a lot of work, and horses are expensive. You've got to have the land for them. You've got to maintain them and feed them, of course, and keep them healthy in the shoes, and of course the horses themselves are quite expensive. A good Andalusian is quite expensive, but I'm bringing money, and we were having lovely gardens. We had our we eventually sold the farm and we moved down to Ashland, and we got this smaller place, smaller acreage down in Ashland, in the hills outside Ashland. It was a great location. It was literally about 12 minutes to town, but it was higher altitude. So in the summers, when it would be 120 even, I remember it being 118 down in the valley. It was absolutely unbelievably hot down there, and we were up above the heat. We were about good 20 degrees cooler up where we were on the ranch, and in the winter we were above the clouds. It was just look out, and it was just like a lovely clear day, and down below there is they're getting inundated with everything, lightning and torrential rain and stuff. Who's going to go to town? It's nasty down there. But we actually we had so much produce we produced. We grew on the. We had lovely gardens. Jules, she was such a master with plants, outdoor plants, growing plants. Eating plants, flowers, stuff like that, not pot plants. I did that. That was my domain. And so we had all this produce, and there were some lovely restaurants down in Ashland. Ashland's, a really upscale, beautiful town. It's the last town in Oregon before you reach the California border. And the pass is literally, we could look across from our property and see the freeway winding up to go over the pass and down into California, where we were that close. And so we would trade the restaurants. We'd give them produce. We just give them produce, and they'd say, "Well, you can come and eat here anytime, or you'd have to pay for your wine, but you can have anything you want off the menu anytime." Nice. So we had a handful of restaurants that we would just give produce to, and come anytime to dine and just bring our own wine. It was great. We didn't have to buy their wine. We could even just bring our own wine, pay corkage. And so we got to a place where we were pretty much self-sufficient right there on the ranch. Between the horses, we were breeding and raising Andalusians. We were breeding and raising Australian Shepherds and Bengal cats. And of course we had chickens and all kinds of food and fruit trees, and beautiful flower gardens and herb gardens. We had water at the top of the property, running water year round, top of the property, and the bottom of the property. So we had a pond at the top, you know, with fresh water coming off the stream, and the lower we had the same thing at the bottom of the property. Beautiful pastures, and you know, I had renovated the main. Well, I'll come to that later. We're at half an hour.
Oh, wow.
Ta-da!
Well, that's a great spot to stop. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please like and subscribe. Share with your friends. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you very
guys.
much.
Bye.